Greetings everyone. So if you are interested in paganism, religion, philosophy, you might have heard the argument from the Christian side that the pagan world basically lacked morals and didn't know what was right and wrong until the Judeo-Christian tradition came in and basically taught us how to behave and how to be good citizens and good neighbors to each other. And that's basically the argument that Wes Huff is making here, the Christian apologetic. And this post was shared by a friend of mine on Facebook, and I answered in a wall of text that I don't think anyone bothered reading. And then I shared it on Wes Huff's own page as well, and he has since then deleted it. So I can't share the original post, but I found an article about it. So this is what he writes. Lots of opinions on Nolan's Odyssey adaptation, wrote Huff in a post on X. And while I have thoughts on the historical accuracy, or lack thereof, in armor and weaponry, costume design, here's a different angle. And he's going to go on about the morals, or rather lack of morals, in the original story. Huff continued, if you watch the film, I bet you're going to see ethics play out equally as redesigned and anachronistic. Our ethical sensibilities are completely different today than in the late Bronze Age of Mycenaean Greece, and I of course agree with that. I agree they're different, but are they worse? Or are they just based on a different framework, a different view of life? Well, let's go on. Huff went on to list some of the actions of Odysseus in Homer's The Iliad and the Odyssey that are not likely to appear in Nolan's film, including infanticide, the mutilation and torture of defeated enemies, and the enslavement and murder of women. I mention these only because while these details may sound terrible to us, and who would argue, this was part of the heroism of the ancient world. Really. Infanticide, mutilation, torture, that was part of the heroism. Yeah, not just part of the story, part of the narrative, no, it was part of the heroism. Well, we'll see about that. Homer does not account for our modern sensibility, and the reason for that is that our modern ethical assumptions have a very distinct biblical tone to them. That is true. Huff pointed out that Homer's sense of morality was rooted in an understanding of the world that predated the cultural influence of Christian ideals that have so shaped the Western society that they have become assumed. We can assume that tossing babies off walls, as if that was a daily occurrence. Alright, let's go on to killing unarmed civilians, raping and enslaving. Things that, by the way, in different abilities, different ways goes on today. I mean, America is supposed to be a Christian nation, but when it comes to babies, how we treat babies, especially the unborn ones, I mean, I'm not going to pull up any numbers on that now. It's not about that, but throwing stones in glass houses and all that, right? Killing unarmed civilians, I mean, human behavior haven't changed. There's nothing new under the sun, and not much have actually changed. It's just been kind of shuffled around a bit. It's under the carpet. We can assume that tossing babies off walls, killing unarmed civilians, raping and enslaving, torturing and dismembering are things people ought not to do. But we think this because of the last 2,000 years of Christian ethics whispering in our ears. People of the past may have thought these acts heroic, not horrific. Well, no. But when you are in touch with raw nature, raw reality, and which never becomes more stark as in war, the heroic act is not to rape or murder. The act of heroism is in victory, in glory, in heroic feats of extreme strength. These things are what is heroic, because it saved your nation, saved your people against an opposing force. And these things, they go on today. When people are in touch with raw reality today, even in a Christian framework, you send a Christian nation, supposedly so, like America or Great Britain, out in war in Iraq. Was a hot topic when I grew up. And oh gosh, I mean, the acts of rape and torture. I remember the many stories of torture of the Iraqi prisoners, and the whole prison scandal. What was the name of that prison where they got tortured, held and tortured? The kind of stuff that goes on today and are being done through Christian nations in the world is no better. This is part of opposing forces, the ugliness of war. I guess they just were less, they clutched their pearls a bit less back in the days. It was a little bit more close to them. The forces of nature, the forces of man, the unleashed. This is how it looks like. Not necessarily a value judgment in that. But what he has a problem with here is the lack of value judgment, that it isn't a condemning of these things within the text. Well, it's a description of war times. It's just part of reality. And the justification behind doing them will become clear once we get to my reply. Take note with Nolan's rendering of Homer. How will it cast narrative in the framework of 21st century AD values rather than the 8th or 7th century BC? Yeah, I mean, we've heard this before. I've heard this before in different ways, right? That the pagan world didn't know ethics, didn't know virtue, didn't know morals, didn't really know in from out, up from down, until the Christian kindness entered into the world, and just set everything straight. Now, I'm not anti-Christian at all. In some sense, I see myself as Christian. I see myself as pagan too. Might be something you would find surprising. How does that work? Well, I see it as part of the European story, in a sense. There's parts of the Christian. I see Christian as a European expression, movement, but with a Jewish origin, a Semitic origin, and some of that is kind of rubbing against the more natural inclination of the European soul, and it has kind of hindered us. So there's parts of it that doesn't work with us, I believe. The part of the teachings, part of the foundations that doesn't work with us. Yet it's been transformed into something that we managed to express culturally over the past 1,000 years. A side of the European nature that is gentle and loving and also strong. But a lot of that did not have its origins necessarily in Christianity itself, but just in the folk soul of the European. So we succeeded despite of Christianity rather than because of it, but it is still part of our story. It's still part of who we are. And sometimes for Christianity to succeed in the extent that it did, it had to turn a blind eye to some of the stuff that they had to do. It was, or they had to kind of forego some of its teachings or ideals in order in face of just cold reality. So in his original post, Wes Huff brings up 4 examples that portrays or demonstrates how these ancient Greeks were beyond the pale when it came to when it came to their morals. And this is what he writes. Try this on for size. In the Greek epic, Odysseus persuades the Greeks to toss the infant son of Hector over the walls of Troy. After the Trojan War, Odysseus kills all the men and enslaves the women of Ismarus. Odysseus tortures a goat herd for being sympathetic to suitors of his wife who thinks that he is dead. The torturing includes cutting off the man's appendages, which includes removing hands, feet, ears, nose, and genitals, which he then feeds to the dogs. When Odysseus finally gets home, he has his son brutally hang 12 of his slave girls who slept with the suitors attempting to woo his wife after his presumed death. So these are the examples he brings up to that he finds discredits the Greco-Roman world and its morals. So this is my response to that. One got to be careful when judging a past that we not only do not fully understand, but that also is the foundation and kernel of our civilization. The ethics of the ancients were based on strength, order, life, and guarding your territory in a world where your only right you could ever claim to anything was by your ability to defend it. The Christian morals are in a way a continuation of the Western story, but also a subversion of traditional masculine and solar qualities that kept the world upright. The Christian world therefore had to undercut some of its own tenets and biblical teachings to uphold and defend the Western order, the Crusades being a good example of this. This in turn revitalized the Western world and brought about renewed vigor and strength, values that the Christian ethos does not really have. Western civilization as it is now, or has been, is a negotiation between ancient pagan ideal of heroism, strength and solar masculinity, and Christian pity, selflessness and feminine love. What I am saying is that values such as fairness, compassion, equality are luxuries that one can come to rely on only once the order has been painstakingly carved out through generations of blood and steel out of raw and cruel nature. They should be recognized as such, a luxury. And once the underlying masculine structures are eroded, chaos and the raw struggle of the might is right will come back again, and with a vengeance. They should not be taken for granted. The ancient man was much more in touch with his raw nature, and it made him stronger. But his will to order and spiritual heroism brought the spiritual principles to life in a fallen world and elevated it to order, a mirror of heavenly structures. It is on these spiritual principles of order, brotherhood, truth, justice, sacred hierarchy, divine love, and so on, that anything that we can ever call civilization is based upon. Christianity has, in later years, perhaps more than 100, forgot or rejected the masculine principles of the West, and found itself incapable of emitting the warrior ethos and strength that the Western man needed in order to defend our countries from chaos, whether it be leftist perversions, the destruction of the family and religion, or mass migration. Christianity, as it now stands, don't have the high ground to truly defend almost nothing, for it squirms at the smell of blood, or at the duty of sacrifice needed to prevent future bloodshed and chaos. Christians need to recognize this if they ever hope to be a relevant force in the West again. If they don't, the pagan movement, already growing in the youth, and I mean here the solar pagan of the heroic tales and the ancient virtues, not Wicca or witchcraft or nature worship, which is a subverted lunar type of paganism and often nothing but a rebellious reaction to Christianity. This paganism will only take further root, for it speaks to a need and answers to a problem very real in the mind of the young. Who am I? What is my identity and where do I belong? Not in the next world, but in this world.
What is my duty? Who are my people? And how do I defend them? Where do I find strength? In the crucified God? Or in gods that made my ancestors great, with tales and stories of glory, such that we still speak of them or make movies of them to this day? Now this is a real challenge, because when the young men turn to the churches, do the elders tell them to tone it down, find inner gentleness and compassion, pray and hope and dream of heaven? Or do they provide the guidance and strength to defend their families, homelands and values? Do they provide them with order, truth and uprightness in the face of a world that relentlessly wants to subvert and upend every standard and principle, whether it be the family versus dating apps, beauty over ugliness, community over selfishness, brotherhood over money chasing, the kinsman before the foreigner, dignity instead of perversions, and so on. Now, we can judge the actions of the heroes in the ancient tales if we want, but we should remember that their greatness does not lie in following Christian sensibilities, but in victory, glory, inspiration, strength and steadfastness, even in the face of death itself. With a raised sword and defiant spirit, they accepted death and entered into the halls of their gods to commune with their forefathers. It is in this spirit that the West exists at all. Why the Greeks held off the Persians, the German tribes united against the Huns, how they held off the Romans, and so on. It is the spirit of defying defeat itself, of an unbroken spirit, of refusal of slavery. This spirit is desperately needed again in a modern world of increased surveillance, digital ID, social credit systems, thought policing, labor slavery, insane levels of taxation and inflation. We can accept the burden as Jesus accepted his cross, or stand up and say, no, I will remain free and unbroken as my forefathers before me. Now, when it comes to the specific examples mentioned above, and these are the examples that Wes Huff took out as these 4 examples. So let's go through them. The son of Hector would have certainly sworn revenge upon the slayers of his father. And being a noble, he would have had no issue amassing an army of himself, causing further strife between the warring nations. So his death assured the end to that. This is not part of Homer's Odysseus though, but a later speculation. So that's worth keeping in mind. Now Ismarus was an ally of Troy. The island of Ismarus was an ally of Troy, so perfectly fair game to the Greeks as they made their way back home. In war, especially in ancient times, you attacked your enemy when in a position of strength, or you would see yourself overwhelmed at a later stage when the enemy had a time to regain strength and manpower. To attack them was nothing but a continuation of the war, stopping any further risk of uprising and also providing spoils, helping them with their journey home. The company delayed too long on the island, and they were feasting and drinking, so they got attacked back in turn by their allies of the Siconis of Ismarus. So, and the story of Melanthius is pretty straightforward. Melanthius is Odysseus' servant, and he is committing the worst crimes, according to the ancient world, and that is that of disloyalty. Without the sacred order of master and servant, which is but one example of a sacred hierarchy, no order is possible at all, no trust, no fruit will come of anything. While Odysseus is away, over 100 suitors overrun his palace, trying to steal his wife and deplete all resources. Melanthius fails in his duty and sides with invaders instead. Then insults and kicks Odysseus disguised as a beggar. He supplies goats for the feast to the suitors, and, the worst crime of all, he provides them with weapons from the storeroom to arm them when confronting Odysseus. Later on, the loyal herdsman punishes their disloyal peer with no mercy. It's a moral tale making an example of Melanthius to warn off disloyal servants and traitors. It's not about bloodlust, it's about restoring order. Again, order. Without order, what you have? Chaos. Without cosmos, there is chaos. And what makes cosmos, what makes order?
man does. Man does. The man is back in the house. That's what this is about.
Many cruel punishments were carried out against traitors and subversives for the same purpose of restoring order in the Christian world. This is worth keeping in mind. There are some obvious examples that I don't need to mention. So the story of the slave girls who slept with the suitors is in similar vein. And the moral is this: don't betray the master of the house, or you are making your own ugly bed for what's to come when order is to be restored.